Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel, M Stewart Paintings. On today's acrylic painting tutorial, we're going to learn how to paint water. We're going to teach you how to blend a realistic underpainting with realistic colours. I'm going to teach you how to paint waves, how to paint light shimmering on water, and then how to create realism using just some little tips and techniques throughout the video so you can paint and learn how to paint realistic water. So let's get into it. So it's a really nice easy tutorial today, but you will need the following colours. They are white, yellow, purple, cerulean blue, cobalt blue and black. Now I have a 9 by 12 inch canvas, so all I've done is painted burnt sienna, and I've used chalk to put where I want the shimmer to be. So don't worry so much about painting your canvas burnt sienna. The only reason I've done that is so I can see where I need a dark tone. Now to make the blue we're going to make, you're going to mix cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a little bit of purple, a dot of black and lots of white. So cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a little bit of purple, dot of black and some white. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to speed up the footage just while I'm mixing it. And all we're going to do is where that burnt sienna is, we're just going to block in our painting with this lovely sort of sea tone for our ocean water. And what we're doing is we're creating a realistic underpainting, and we're going to try to create a dark tone on the left hand side, and where we've used chalk we can easily just cover up that burnt sienna and just leave areas where we've got the white chalk, and we can use that later. Now the reason I painted the canvas burnt sienna, unlike the last water tutorial, was simply for the fact that because we're going to use a very light tone for our highlights, all I'm doing here, I'm just adding some cerulean blue, some cobalt blue and lots of white to get this pre-mixed tone I've got here on the left hand side. Yes, because we're going to use a very light tone for our shimmering water, we're going to use white and a tiny bit of yellow. I didn't want to use a pencil because unfortunately with pencils, because the dark black of the lead, sometimes it can leave dirty marks, and because we're going to use such a pastel tone for our highlights, we don't want that. Now the reason I'm using light blue on the right hand side and just gently blending it into our shadow tone for our shimmering water is simply for the fact is as we're moving towards the right hand side, the light is going to be shining on that area of the water and it's just going to be lighter in tone. So it's a little trick just to trick your eye. So if you can see already, just by having a dark tone on the left and having a lighter blue on the right, and by already just creating these shimmering shapes, we're just trying to create the illusion of light hitting water. And I'm going to teach you later on in the video how to make it all look 3D, but all we want to do is just leave plenty of gap. We'll block all this in, but we just want to create the illusion of the water going up and down and that sort of shimmer on the right hand side. So as I say, don't worry with acrylics if it's very streaky, if you've got any burnt sienna shining through, that's quite normal. Acrylics always dry very streaky, and sometimes, especially if you're painting stuff like water, look, there's lots of streaky. Look, watch, if you put extra paint on it and just give it a second coat of paint, you can make it just look much more smooth and much more water-like. So if you get any streaks, just dry it with your painting with a hairdryer and just reapply the exact same tones of paint over the top, look like I'm doing, and you should get a lovely, more blended look. So all I'm going to do is just edit it out. I'm just going to do the exact same thing. So look, all I'm doing is just where I've done the light tone over again and I've just done the dark tone, and all I've done is mix the two tones in the middle just to bridge that colour. Now if you just mix a lot of white and a dot of yellow, and if you just fill in where you've had the chalk and just create these little sort of ripples in the water, so white and a little dot of yellow, so predominantly white, and again because it's such a pastel tone you will get lots of the canvas showing up underneath, so you probably will have to do 2 coats of paint. That is quite normal because white is such a light tone. But all we're doing, we're just implying where the highlights are going to be. So all I'm doing is just creating little squiggles, and again I want the light side to be the lightest part of our painting because that's where the light is going to come from, and the left hand side is where we're going to sign it, obviously in the bottom left, and we want to darken up the left hand side. So we've got this lovely bright white. Now that we've got 2 coats of paint, I'll put the speed of the video back down so everyone can slow down and see what's happening. So if we mix some black and some blue and just a little bit of that pre-mixed colour we had, so some black and a blue and a darker sort of blue we use for our shadow tone on the left hand side. So we've got this musty dark blue, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the paint near enough off my brush with just a little bit, and I've got a dry brush and a flat brush. I'm just going to create the illusion of waves. So all I'm going to do is come up like little crescents, and I'm just going to go around areas, and I'm just going to give the water a more 3D effect. So if anyone watched the previous tutorial, which was a very easy version of how to paint water, what we're doing now is we're going to add light and we're going to add more 3D waves to give the illusion of realistic water. So this tutorial is a little bit more advanced than the previous one, and it's to teach you how to make your water look realistic. So all we're doing, I'm just using this darker shadow tone, and all I'm doing is just creating squiggles in the water. So I'm creating shapes, and I'm just trying to imply, I'm just going around it, but I'm leaving plenty of gaps in the underpainting to make it look 3D. So if I just mix a little bit more, so blue, black, and a bit of that blue we had pre-mixed earlier, which was blue, purple, dot of black and some white. So all we're doing is just creating some waves. And the great thing about a flat brush, because it's flat, you can get quite good, nice sturdy lines for your waves. But it's already starting to look more 3D by just adding a darker tone. Now every time you get a wave, you're going to get a shadow. So what we're doing is we're putting in all these shadows to give the illusion of 3 dimensions, to make our painting look not as flat. It's a very hard thing to draw realistically and paint realistically, so water especially is very hard. So hopefully these tutorials are going to show you a cheat that by laying the underpainting down and the highlight colour, by adding now the shadows over the top, we can trick the viewer's eyes and get realistic water. So all I'm doing, as I say, I'm just trying to create contours in the water. I want to darken up this left hand corner because I want it to frame the painting. As I say, we want the darkest tones on the left hand side. And all I'm doing, I'm trying to teach you how to paint water and how to paint waves. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating little circles and little dots. Sometimes on the highlights you get little outlines of shadows. So what you can do, I'll teach you towards the end of the video how to do that. So I'm going to take some blue and black and a tiny bit of purple and make an even darker tone now. And these are going to be our harshest shadows. So again, I just want to emphasize certain areas and just make some of my waves a little bit stronger in not only tone, in the dark tone, but also stronger as in just bigger, a bit meaner. So what we're doing is just by using that really dark shadow tone, we're just implying where the harshest shadows are, and they could be sort of the darkest contrast, because we're trying to get a contrast between light and dark. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make our water look 3-dimensional simply from having a contour between the lights and the darks, and it should already start to trick the viewer's eyes and start looking more and more realistic. So all I'm doing is just creating shapes, and I have odd dots, and they're just the little caps of waves, and as I say, the little circles, and sometimes you get little shimmers, you get little sort of outlines. So look, just by doing a little outline, the brush is very, very thin. I'm just outlining some of the highlights just to give it a look of ripples. So where you have ripples in the water, where you have a really bright highlight, sometimes you also get a very dark shadow that outlines the highlight. So it's just having patience. As I say, the previous tutorial was very, very easy. So all we're doing now is we're just trying to make everything very nice and smooth, everything very circular. So when you're happy with it, please dry it. And we're going to start adding the detail on the top just to make it look prettier. So we've got this pre-mixed version, which was, do you remember, it was cobalt blue, cerulean blue, purple, a dot of black and lots of white, and then just by adding a little bit of more white and a tiny bit of cobalt blue and cerulean blue, you can have a lighter tone. So what we're going to do, just to make our water look more realistic, is we're going to use the darker of the two blues, and we're just going to go round areas and try to smoothen them over. So just by using a smaller round-headed brush, what you can do, rather than have a flat brush and very harsh sharp edges, what we want to do is make more grooves and more smooth edges. So by using the darker of the two blues, all we're going to do is we're just going to go around where we've got harsh edges, and we're just going to smoothen everything up. So we're going to try and make everything look very much more circular and very smooth. Now what you can do, if you see any areas of burnt sienna or anything like that, we just want to just block them back in, we just want to cover them up. But what you can do is outline the darker areas to create, again, a more 3D look. So look, all I'm doing is where we've added that really dark shadow, I'm just going to create an outline. So I'm literally outlining it. So same principle, we're trying to make everything smooth. So look, if I do it on this one, I'll show you. We're trying to make it very rounded, and all I'm doing, imagine when we were doing the highlights on our clouds in previous tutorials, all we're doing is going exactly round that shape and creating an outline. But again, we're trying to make it very, very smooth, very, very circular, no sharp edges. So look, we're just outlining the waves. And what that's going to do, again, is trick your eye. So look, watch. We're just going to go outline this area, and it's going to create this sort of ripple effect and make it look like it's 3D. So look, watch. We're just going round, making it very smooth. We don't want any sharp edges. We're using plenty of paint, and we're just going to make it very circular, and we're just going to outline it. And that's going to try to create a ripple. So it's a really easy technique, and because it's near to the viewer, it's quite large. So watch, we're just outlining it, just outlining some of these shapes just to create the illusion that it's 3D. So it's super easy. And what that should be doing, when you've got the dark tones, they look like the deepest part of the wave where the shadow is, and where you've got the lighter tone, that looks like the light sort of surrounding that area, and they look like the highest bits of the waves that are catching the light. So because we're using a lighter tone, and because we use the darker tone in the left hand corner, all it's doing is just highlighting the areas. Because we're going round everything, just making it smoother, it just looks a lot prettier. So it's just a very patient way of working. So as I say, it's not hard. A lot of these tutorials aren't hard. They're just very, very, you just have to have a bit of patience. So just going round everywhere and just trying to smoothen everything up is the secret. So if you can just have patience and just take your time and just go around it. Now if you add a little bit of white and a little bit of the cerulean blue and the cobalt blue to that tone, you should get a lighter tone. So I'm just putting a bit more of that white and yellow in just to make that area just look a bit nicer. Same here, just to make the highlights. As I say, acrylics always dry darker than you think, so even with the bright tones like the highlights, sometimes if you want to make them sparkle, you want to make them look more extreme in highlights, you want them to look brighter, you do just have to sometimes give them 2 or 3 coats, especially with things like white, just to give it a brighter look. So look, all I'm doing, I'm just putting some highlights now in the darker areas. So I'm just using that white with the dot of yellow just to look where some of the light is shimmering, but again they're very circular. See, even these little highlights that I'm creating, they're all little blobs, they're very circular, and even if they're sort of zigzaggy in shape, they're still very smooth and they're very circular. I don't want anything with a sharp edge, I don't want anything looking that's not like a circle. So there we go. So look, if you add some of the blue and white together and you just have a lighter tone, we're just going to do the exact same trick but just with a lighter blue. So again, we're just outlining a few of them and we're creating some of these light blue shapes and circles even around our highlights. And it's just to emphasize them, and what it does as well, it just merges the highlights, that white and yellow, into the light blue. It's not as harsh, so it just looks a little bit more seamless. So as I say, with water, it's anything in nature, the transitions are seamless, you don't notice them. That's how amazing it is. So if you can start to be more perceptive, where you start noticing that as an artist, you can start copying it, and when you are able to start copying it, that's when your artwork will take off. Because when you notice things in nature and you start studying it, you can try to recreate it. So look, all I'm doing, again, smooth edges, I'm just trying to create outlines, or I'm just trying to create little shapes to represent ripples in the water. So by just using the lighter of the blues, you can do the exact same technique by just creating little circles, adding even to your highlights little divots in the white and yellow just with that light blue. Just gives the illusion of more realism. Like, we want to be able to paint, learn how to paint realistic water. So as I say, this tutorial is a little bit more advanced, but it's not too hard. But we just create these little circles every so often just to make it look more realistic. Now we're going to get some cobalt blue and some black and a little bit of that pre-mixed tone that we had earlier, and we're just going to make an in-between tone, so not too dark, not too light, just right in between like we had before. And we're just going to outline some of our highlights. So as I say, we're just doing the exact same trick. Now all I'm doing is using a fine liner, and I'm just creating lines and circles, sort of little squiggles, just to imply shapes and ripples in our highlights. So look, I'm just going round and just trying to create shapes within the highlights. So I'm just either creating little circles, or I'm just creating little outlines with a very thin brush just to go round it and just create an outlined shape just to imply sort of contours in the water, just to make it look more realistic. So look, all I'm doing, just with that nice tone, just putting in some darker waves now. Just using a flat brush, I'm just making them just with that darker tone. Oh, it's not dark enough, need to darken it up a little bit. Just trying to come down a bit onto the water just to make them look a bit more wave like. We're just coming a bit more diagonally and just making a few a little bit sharper, just with that sharp edge of my brush, just creating sort of Y shapes in the water, so like a squash Y, just trying to make them look a bit more like waves. So if you mix some blue and black together, just to get a very, very dark Prussian blue. So blue and black. We're going to do exactly the same trick that we just did with our ripples. So we're going to create circles with a highlighter, with a fine liner. And all we're going to do is create contours in the water and just darken up some of those shadows. So we're just going to create sort of little circles and outlines in our ripples. And because this dark tone is so sharp, it's almost going to make it look a little bit comically. But what it's going to do is just make it look really realistic when we step back in a minute. So when we're zoomed in like this and you're watching, it won't look so realistic, but when you see this from maybe a foot or two away, it will look incredibly realistic. So all we're doing, look, we're just creating shapes and we're just smoothing up and we're just using that really dark tone to emphasize some of the waves and look, some of the wiggles. So all we're doing is almost outlining it, but with a very thin, very dark tone. So look, all I'm doing is just leaving gaps in the underpainting, and I'm leaving the highlights. I'm not going right up to the edge. Look, I'm creating shapes within it, just to make it look like little shadows and little ripples in our water. So by just taking 5-10 minutes and using a really fine liner, you can make a huge difference. So just outlining some of your ripples, just drawing some of the circles, just implying contours, can really trick the viewer's eyes. So as I say, once we go and we do all of this, your water, you should have learned how to paint water, how to paint waves, and also how to paint water that is realistic, which is a big thing. If you are finding the tutorial hard and you're finding it a bit advanced, we do have an easier version that I painted earlier in the week, which should be available on my channel. But I want you to try to push yourself. I want you to try to learn. I want you to try to strive to get better by doing more advanced things, but also having the attitude that you think you can and you think you can do this. It will really help you. And by throwing yourself in at the deep end, with the water, that's a good pun, by throwing yourself in the deep end and actually trying harder, more advanced tutorials is the only way to get better. So look, all we're doing, we're just creating little splodges, we're just creating little dots. We're still doing the same techniques though, we're still very smooth, we've got nothing too sharp, but we're just putting that fine detail in now, just to finish her off, just to make her look fantastic. She's looking gorgeous and she's looking very real. So she's super cool. I've signed her in the left hand corner, so you've learned how to do a shimmer effect by using the lighter tone and the darker tone to the left hand side. We've got this gorgeous white and yellow shimmer in the water. You've learned how to do outlines, you've learned how to do contours and shadows in your water to give it a 3D, more realistic approach, and you've learned how to paint waves. So a really fantastic realistic painting. So thank you so much for watching this acrylic painting tutorial. We have plenty of landscape paintings, we have other paintings, how to paint ocean water, how to paint sea foam in the playlist now. My name is Murray. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and take care of yourself guys. So goodbye, take care, bye.